Hello, friends. I am Vitaly Portnikov. The foreign ministers of Ukraine and Russia found themselves participants in the same diplomatic forum that took place in Antalya, Turkey. This is Turkey's main international forum with the participation of the country's president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, as well as many heads of state, governments, and diplomatic departments. And, by the way, the foreign ministers of Ukraine and Russia are not meeting for the first time at this venue. In 2022, after Russia's attack on Ukraine, both the then Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba and the head of Russia's Foreign Policy Department, Sergey Lavrov, were invited to Antalya. And as a sign of respect to the host of the forum, the then Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu, they even agreed to a bilateral meeting. However, this meeting demonstrated a complete lack of possibility for dialogue between Moscow and Kyiv. It was evident that Sergey Lavrov, following directives from the Kremlin, was inclined towards a forceful resolution of the Ukrainian issue. And he was absolutely not interested in a real conversation with his Ukrainian counterpart. Currently, of course, the Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiga has not met with Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov. Lavrov even emphasized that there was not even a 1-minute contact between the foreign ministers. However, both ministers spoke at the forum sessions in Antalya, and these speeches once again demonstrated the complete lack of the possibility of finding any real compromise between Russia and Ukraine. If anyone needed to realize how distant the positions of the two countries are and how far the distance is. Regarding the end of the Russian-Ukrainian war, it was enough to simply listen to the speeches of Sybiga and Lavrov to be convinced of this once again. Andriy Sybiga, however, spoke about how Ukraine would like to end the war this year, but it advocates for a just and comprehensive peace. And in that, to such a peace that there is a significant distance in terms of negotiations, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, of course, blamed the Russian side. In that, his accusations are justified. Anyone who attended the panel, with the participation of the Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs, could be convinced. Andrei Lavrov repeated all these theses that we have been hearing since the year 2000, in 2014, and which served as justification for Russian President Putin's large-scale attack on our country in February 2022. Sergey Lavrov emphasized that the rights of the Russian minority in Ukraine are being violated and everything related to the Russian language, culture, and Russian media is being destroyed. And that, for Russia, the main concern is not the territory, but the people who live on these lands, the people who created cities like Odessa, and who built factories, roads, and ports. And as it could be understood, Sergey Lavrov is specifically talking about the Russian people, not the Ukrainian people, trying to explain to his audience what Russia's grievances with Ukraine are and why the Russian political leadership refuses to grant the Ukrainian state the status of a sovereign entity. The Russian foreign minister also disagreed with the possibility of the presence of Western peacekeepers on European terms, and emphasized that all the agreements currently being made between French President Emmanuel Macron, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen are linked to the desire to keep the current government in Kyiv, which violates the rights of Russians. This is not for peace, but for the preservation and protection of power. In Kyiv, you want to maintain the regime currently led by Zelensky, who does not respect international obligations, said Sergey Lavrov in his speech. And, of course, it was clear to understand that there was no real need to end the war from the Russian minister at the borders. What truly became new was Sergey Lavrov's attempt to demonstrate how constructive the dialogue between the USA and Russia is. Moreover, the minister constantly emphasized that this dialogue is taking place precisely at the suggestion of the American side, that it was Trump who proposed returning to normal life, to stop the idiocy that disgraces America's role in world affairs, and more, precisely at the initiative of the United States. Russia is discussing joint projects that can be implemented if Moscow reaches an agreement with Washington. Thus, Lavrov made it clear that Moscow is enjoying the fact that, thanks to President Trump, Putin managed to interrupt international isolation. The Biden administration decided that Russia must learn a lesson, and this punishment will be associated with isolation. And as we can see, isolation, from the perspective of the Russian foreign minister, turned out to be completely ineffective from the standpoint of the Russian political leadership, thanks to the willingness of US President Donald Trump to talk with the Russian president. Well, and of course, against this backdrop, we perfectly understand that if the foreign ministers of Russia and Ukraine were to meet, they would practically have nothing to talk about. About what? Even regarding a ceasefire, there would be no possibilities for any real agreements. Moreover, Andriy Sybiga reminded in Antalya that Russia constantly violates the so-called energy truce, which was supposedly established following the last phone conversation between Trump and Putin. Similarly, Lavrov accused Ukraine of the same, in the best Russian traditions, of violating this truce, which was agreed upon by the presidents of the USA and the Russian Federation. And thus, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine emphasized that the world supports his country's principled approach to a just peace. And the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, who emphasized that Russia would adhere to the ideologies that became the main reason for Russia's attack on Ukraine, appeared at the forum as people from different planets. Only the war, which Russia started against Ukraine, and which evidently, if you listen to Lavrov, they do not intend to end in the foreseeable future. It continues here on this planet. Thank you, friends. Stay on this channel, subscribe to it, follow my social media and the channels on Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, Ko-Fi and Donatella, which help develop these resources. And use the sponsorship feature on YouTube itself. Victory and peace to